Okay, we are live. Have a good meeting.
All right, thank you, Casey, and welcome everyone. This is the regularly scheduled virtual meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners. It is Monday, May 17th at 3:01 p.m. First item on the agenda is call the meeting to order, which I have now done. I'll establish a quorum. We have all three commissioners present. Next item would be the adoption of the consent calendar. These are items of a routine nature or items that have come before the Board of Commissioners before. Staff or commissioners may highlight an item now if they wish to do so. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar as presented.
Mr. Chair, I would move for adoption of the consent calendar as presented.
I will second Commissioner Hall's motion.
All right, it's moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you. All right, we'll now move down to some discussion and information items. First item would be the Fall Creek Slide and associated road closure. And we have our Director of Public Works, Roy Kenyon, with us. And is there a representative from Weyerhaeuser Timber?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, Susan, okay, thank you. Go ahead, Director Kenyon.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Roy Kenyon, Public Works Director for Lincoln County. And I've asked Susan Shaw, geologist from Weyerhaeuser, to speak to you this afternoon about the Fall Creek Slide, East Fall Creek Road, road closure, and kind of what we're looking at going forward. And so to kind of go back in time a little bit, back to 2017, late in 2017, there was some signs of some ground movement adjacent to Fall Creek Road and above Fall Creek Stream itself at about the 3.5 mile marker. So we're above the fish hatchery by about a mile or so. Weyerhaeuser, Susan, and some other employees did some looking and realized that there was a fairly large chunk of ground that was starting to move up on the hillside. It was estimated at the time to be, I believe, about 35 acres. Everyone started monitoring the situation. It was reported to be moving, but not catastrophically. The next year, back in basically late 2018, it was determined that we were looking at the possibility of a catastrophic failure. And so emergency manager Jenny Damaris started the process to set up emergency evacuation just in case there was a catastrophic failure, which they believed would result in the damming of Fall Creek and then maybe lead to a secondary catastrophic failure that would basically put the residents downstream in danger. So she set up the Everbridge system as a direct warning to all the residents below this slide. And like everything else, you know, you prepare, and nothing really seems then to ever happen. You know, when you're ready, it never happens. Well, that's not really the case here. Just before Christmas, I think December 20th in 2020, one evening late, the low water alarms at the fish hatchery went off, which meant that something had affected the flow of the stream. The call went out, Everbridge notified the residents, basically left the drainage, and supposedly the flow was blocked, not for sure how long, but upwards of about an hour, and then flow of the stream was restored. When basically we had daylight the next day, went to see what had happened, and there had been a very large failure of the slide. It come down, crossed the county road, and pretty much hit the county bridge about dead on. it did actually block the flow of the stream for some period of time. The water ran over the bridge and over the road. And I guess just by luck, it actually washed itself out to the point where the water then was running back underneath the bridge where it had before that time. We inspected the bridge. There was some significant damage to one stringer. It basically did some other damage to the bridge. There was about 250 foot stretch of road was buried underneath the slide. And it was then at that point in time decided that it was really too dangerous to be working directly underneath this slide. And so we decided to let it sit, let it dry out, let the weather dry out before we decided how we were going to proceed. Sometime after that, we actually had a meeting with Susan and some other representatives of Weyerhaeuser, and they informed us that what we had thought was the catastrophic failure was actually really just the tip of the iceberg, and that what we have sitting up there is far larger than the actual failure that we had witnessed, and that was great potential for a more catastrophic failure sometime in the future. And anyway, basically we were trying to figure out how to proceed. We had a damaged bridge that needed to be repaired before it could be opened up. We had a large stretch of road that was buried under a slide that the debris would have to be cleaned up. And then even if we did that, we were actually opening up a road that looked like it had potential for a large failure. And so we had maybe a public safety interest there that we needed to address. And so I decided that we would wait until things dried out to see if anything further happened down there. And then I would come to the board and bring a question as far as closure and discuss the issue. Susan has been good enough to come today to basically go far deeper into the slide. This is her area of expertise, not mine. And so what I'd like to do is turn the floor over to her so she can explain to you in far better depth than what I have as far as what we're looking at, what the potential is, and what steps we're probably going to take going forward. So Susan, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you very
Welcome,
much.
Susan.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to come and participate in your meeting today. What I would like to do is essentially add some photos to the good summary that Roy just provided for you. Before I get started though, I'll just introduce myself again. My name is Susan Shaw. I'm a licensed geologist with Weyerhaeuser, and I've been working on landslide issues in the forest management domain for approximately 30 years or so. I do have a slide presentation. Was that something that got loaded? Okay, great.
Yep.
There it is. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just show you photos and essentially give you some sense of the magnitude and the scale and activity level of the Fall Creek landslide, as well as describe some of the hazards that the slide poses to Fall Creek County Road. I'd like to turn my camera on here. Here we are. Okay. Hi, everyone. I also would like to lend Weyerhaeuser support to any proposal that may be put in place for a possible road closure due to our company's concerns regarding public safety in and around the slide. And I would also like to refer you to Weyerhaeuser's Elsie area manager and our public affairs manager, whose names are listed on the slide here, if you have any non-technical questions about the slide. So next slide, please. So I believe the next slide in the series is a slide of the location of the landslide. So I think we need to back up one slide. Sorry about that. So like I said, the slide is approximately a mile upstream of the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. The 3.5-mile county bridge, which was the bridge that got damaged during the December 2020 landslide, is located directly downslope of this landslide. And there's approximately a quarter to half mile of county road that is excavated into old landslide deposits along the base of the slope there. Weyerhaeuser also shares landslide hazard and safety concerns with our downstream neighbors like the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. Today, however, my comments are going to be focused specifically on landslide hazards related to the county road. Okay, next slide. The landslide is located on a broad hill slope in about 30 to 40-year-old timber owned by Weyerhaeuser, and encompasses that slide as of today encompasses almost 100 acres. It is located within an ancient landslide complex that likely predates settlement of this area. So this is a very old feature that was reactivated most likely by a series of rain and ice storm events around late December 2016, early January 2017. The road is located along the base of the slope. You can see in the left-hand image here, which is an image from Google Earth. And to the right, for comparison, is a photo that the Coast Guard took at the request of Lincoln County, just days after the landslide pulse occurred in December of last year. The failure plane is well below the surface of the hill slope, probably hundreds of feet deep, and so that's well below the tree rooting depth, and is likely being driven by groundwater below the surface. This type of failure is less common, but it's not unique to the Coast Range. There are at least 6 other historic slides like this type of slide in the Central Coast Range, most of which have created landslide dammed lakes. And you may be familiar with one just over the drainage divide to the northwest of this slide, Thrift Creek landslide, which created Ayers Lake. And that's just to the northwest. So in this comparison between 2020 and 2016 photos, you can see that the slide reactivated fairly rapidly following those storms in 2016. There were no major indications of failure in 2016 in this photo on the left, although in retrospect, when we began to kind of research the historic behavior of landslides in this area, there were some diagnostic little signs that some sort of failure likely could occur, and those are what are circled in red here. There's kind of a horizontal band, which turns out to be coincident with the portion of the slope that gave way in early 2017. So next slide, please. The next slide shows some indicators of what we actually found in early 2017. Typically, what we find for the mid-slope area failures is some sort of telltale sign of sediment delivery. And here you can see a stream of very turbid water coming in right next to the county bridge. This is suspended sediment load that travels as far downstream, at least you can see the visible signs of it, to the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. So this was discovered by Weyerhaeuser engineers in 2017, which caused them to go upslope looking for the source of the sediment. And what they found was about a 1/4 acre shallow landslide, kind of mid-slope area. They had also discovered that there were some signs way up on the ridge top above the slide of road, the forest road at the top of the slope starting to fall apart. So we took a tour between the county road and the ridgetop and found some additional indications that the slope was starting to unravel. There's been accelerated mass movement observed in this slide since November 2017. In general, the slide is starting to speed up in certain areas. So there's been fairly continuous failure activity from 2017 to the present. It kind of moves in fits and starts. There's kind of a creeping going along, and then at some point we have a large enough rainfall events like that occurred in December of 2020 that causes more of a catastrophic movement of the slide. And so that December 2020 failure was related to about a 5.5 inch rain per 24-hour rainfall. It's referred to as an atmospheric river or a Pineapple Express type event. Okay, next slide, please. So we have been engaged in monitoring this landslide since 2017, and we have partnered with various other entities to get information, of which we've kind of shared around between Weyerhaeuser, a couple of state agencies, and some of our academic cooperators. We've been gathering aerial and ground survey information. The photos on the right are actually provided by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife from drone flights over the midsection of the slope, which has been unraveling at a pretty rapid rate, as you can see from the photos. We've also installed a weather station to gather real-time data. We've brought in additional geotechnical experts, consultants, as well as geotechnical specialists from ODF and academic institutions. In 2019, we began a cooperative research agreement with Dr. Ben Lashinsky, who is a geotechnical engineer on the faculty with OSU College of Forestry and College of Engineering, and he's been instrumenting the site. We have various instruments out on the landslide that are monitoring the rate of ground displacement. So we will continue working with him probably for years into the future as this continues to unravel. Next slide, please. So the next slide is going to show two images. One is on the left is a LiDAR bare earth image. And for those of you who may not be familiar with LiDAR, it's essentially a map that's created by shooting laser beams from an aircraft to the ground. And these laser beams are capable of penetrating through vegetation and exposing just the ground surface. So what you're looking at is the same view for reference on the right there. You can see some rumpled ground in between those two yellow circles, and that's the area that began to unravel first. So back in 2017. with big cracks in the ground, portions of the slope just giving way and sliding down onto a bench that's on just above the county road. So that activity is continued. This slide, the blue dotted line kind of outlines this 100-acre area that is currently experiencing movement. You can see up above that sort of mid-slope rumpled ground is more smooth ground, but that in fact, that ground is also on the move because it's being undermined by all of the failure activity down slope of it. And so we expect this slide to continue unraveling up to the ridge line itself. You can see on the right there, the source area for the December 20th failure. It was approximately 20 acres that gave way, and it's directly in line with the damaged bridge, which is why there was so much material that came down in that particular area. With Dr. Lashinsky's ground displacement monitors, we've detected accelerated movement over in the western upper side of the failure area. That area could potentially deliver to a different section of the county road down slope of it. Down near the road there, you can see a label, old landslide deposits. Those are deposits from this movement of this failure complex from before settlement times. The road was excavated through those deposits. And so the story is there that any portion of the slope, upslope of that entire section of road could and is vulnerable to failures with debris running out onto the road surface there. So that whole upper area is giving away. The next slides, couple of slides, just will give you some examples of what we see on the ground in terms of ground movement. And there's, again, for reference, the 2020 Coast Guard aerial view of the landslide area itself. And we'll start at the top end at the ridge line forest road. We've been watching this road unravel since 2017, essentially. And these photos that you see here were taken earlier in 2021, just within the last few months. On the left, you can see the road surface just cracking and pulling apart. In portions of it, the road's actually been displaced. You can see about a 15 to 20 foot drop in some places where that lower portion of the road is just slumped down. Next slide, please. So further down the slope in that area that I described as having active and accelerated movement, the ground is just riddled with cracks everywhere. There are little blocks of the slope that have been displaced down slope. There's a lot of timber that has been knocked over in the area where there's the red arrow on the right there. There's a major crack in the ground that this photo is actually on the right was taken in 2017 when that crack had a vertical displacement of about 35 feet or so. Now it's over 100 feet in terms of the vertical drop. So there's been quite an acceleration of ground movement in that area. In fact, that displacement is so great, it's kind of hard to take pictures of it from the ground. So, so next slide shows a section of the road County Road. It's just around the corner and upstream from the bridge that was damaged in December of 2020. We actually had some indication that there was enough movement of material upslope that there was sediment deposition occurring in January of last year, January of 2020, along the road edge. And I think the road crew was well aware of these deposits, a lot of fine sediment just stringing down through the trees, winding up in the ditch line, running across the road. So we were aware that things were really speeding up. And then, of course, in 2020, we had this large pulse failure that occurred in both material across the road, and those yellow arrows kind of show the same little group of trees there, give you some perspective. Next slide, please. So what is being shown on the left here is courtesy of Dr. Lashinsky. He and his research group have been doing some studies to try and kind of understand what the volume of material is that's being released from the slide. And what this particular image shows, again, it's a LiDAR hill shade image. So you can see the rumpled ground up above those colored polygons. The colored polygons are showing the different thicknesses of deposits on the slope. So after the slope failed, so they were able to reconstruct this depositional zone from the 2020 failure. And we have, give you kind of a sense for how much material came down. There were about 180,000 cubic yards of debris that were moved down slope in this 2020 failure, which is equivalent to about 18,000 dump truck loads of landslide debris. So there were about 4 to 5 feet of debris that made it as far down as the road and the bridge. And of course, there was a fair amount of really fine sediment that was delivered into the channel and made its way downstream. So on the right there, you can see the location of the bridge across Fall Creek and the deposit that covered up the north side of the road approach to the bridge there. The next photo series shows another possible debris deposition scenario. And so this is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, or what we would likely see if the entire slope fails. And again, those different colored polygons show different thicknesses of the deposits. But I added this to essentially give you some idea of where those deposits might wind up at the base of the slope. So there's a big chunk of road between milepost 3.5, where the bridge is, and milepost 4 upstream. The thicknesses there would probably be on the order of about 60 feet in depth. And we would be looking at something close to 4 million cubic yards of material being carried down slope, which, again, that's about 400,000 dump truck loads of material. So you can see the bridge area is in direct line with these failures, in part because that's the major surface drainage that's draining the slide. And so the bridge's location is essentially right in the bullseye of even the smaller failures. In this type of scenario, it is possible that we could also see some temporary or perhaps more long-term damming of Fall Creek, which could potentially result in a a lake forming for some period of time, and then possible dam burst flood event in that area. So as a footnote, I've added Dr. Lashinsky's contact information if anyone has any additional questions about the geotechnical study that is currently underway. And then finally, last slide. I wanted to just summarize these points. Here we go. So again, the landslide has been active since 2017. We see that movement is accelerating. Since that time, we've had a fair number of smaller failures upslope that have not actually brought coarse debris all the way down to the county road. But again, there's about half mile of county road that's at risk of being impacted directly by slide debris. It's entirely likely that these failure events will continue, but we can't really predict when they will occur, and we can't necessarily predict exactly where within that half mile of road segment that we might experience additional debris deposition on the road. Again, this bridge site is highly susceptible to additional impacts from landslide debris because of its location. And the risk to public safety are high downslope of this active landslide area. And finally, Weyerhaeuser would definitely support a proposal to have a road closure in this area until such time as we have either the slide completely evacuates, or we have some better confidence that the slide is beginning to slow down and stabilize. Again, we're expecting this to continue unraveling for some period of time in the future. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions from commissioners or Director Kenyon, do you have additional comments at this time?
I do. I'll wait to see if anybody has any questions.
Okay, commissioners, I saw Commissioner Hall's microphone turned green.
I don't have any questions at this point. Mainly at this moment, I'm interested in hearing Mr. Kenyon's follow-up comments and whether he does have or will have any recommendations for us in terms of future actions regarding this road.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jacobson.
I have very similar comments to Commissioner Hall. No follow-up questions on the presentation, but would like to hear from Director Kenyon. I also have been out there with Director Kenyon and kind of seen some of this for myself, so I'd kind of like to get to, I guess, the business end of what we need to do about this. Thanks.
Okay, I guess I'm in a similar position. I guess I'm trying to clarify. Weyerhaeuser is supporting or would support a decision that could curtail use of the road. But at this point, I mean, clearly it's a decision to be made by the Board of Commissioners. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Actually, okay, so go ahead.
I was going to say, there are 3 major property owners in this drainage. Weyerhaeuser is the largest property owner. Second is the U.S. Forest Service, and there is another private property piece that is about 350 acres. And we've also been in contact with that individual. That individual actually owns kind of the lower part of this slide. And so he's very well aware of what's going on. Weyerhaeuser is in favor of at least an extended closure to give time to see how this thing plays out. I've reached out to Rob Sanders at the Forest Service, who is the Forest Transportation Planner. They are aware of the issue. I've been really unable to get any kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down from them, but I've had multiple conversations with them and they're very well aware of what's going on up there. The private property owner is also aware, does have other access to his properties. And what you have to understand is, yes, Fall Creek Road is probably the most direct access out to civilization, because basically Highway 34 is 3.5, 4 miles from where the slide is. But there are other ways to access the top part of this drainage. And actually, in the time of going out to the slide, I've been through at least 3, if not 4 of these different paths. You can go up South Track, the 1,000 line off of South Bay Road, and drop down into this drainage. You can actually go over the hill from Harlan and drop down into this drainage. And there's also a road off of Highway 34 that basically skirts around the east end of all this and drops down into Fall Creek. So there isn't anyone that's going to be landlocked. There's other public roads that do access this drainage. And so, if we were looking at a total closure, non-access, we might have to think a little harder about what we'd like to do. But we believe in this case that there are other ways in, other ways out, and that a closure, although it may be a financial impact when it comes to hauling logs, it seems like everyone is in agreement that it would be, fine for us to do this. The other thing is I told you in the beginning, the slide come down on the bridge and the water actually crested over the top of the bridge for some period of time, but somehow it washed itself out. What has been said is that this bridge may be a pinch point for any other movement. And, the bridge as it is not in service. It's not operational. We would have to do some extensive work to it to get it back just to carry traffic. But what the request has been is for us to remove the bridge, set it off to the side to kind of open up the drainage way. And then if at some point in the future, this slide decides it's going to sit down and be good for a while, we can actually put the pieces back in place, replace the one stringer that was damaged in the slide, and reopen the bridge. So what we're asking for is not a permanent closure of Fall Creek, but an extended closure, basically until the data shows that the threat has passed. And at that point in time, the county road department would go back in, replace the bridge, remove the slide debris that covers the road, and open the road back up. If there is a catastrophic failure of, well, like Susan said, probably 100 times what we just seen, then basically maybe, we lose all of our options but we'll see what happens. I can't make that call. No one can make that call. All we can do is basically take into account the hazard that exists if we go in there and try to open the road and make the decision based on that.
Mr. Chair.
All right, so I'll try to clarify. I'm sorry, Commissioner Hall, just a second.
Yes.
What you're asking for is the board to consider a temporary closure of the road, but that closure could be for a significant period of time, dependent on what happens with the land fall.
Well, that is true. Or I guess, and this is actually sounds like kind of a county council question, but the board could order just a flat out closure of the road. And then I guess if anything actually changed in the future, I could come back and request an order to reopen the road. But I guess my point is I want to make it clear to the public and to everyone else that we're not just, washing our hands of this thing and walking away. Our intent is if the situation allows, we will open the road. And so it's just a wording thing, I guess, on the order.
Commissioner Hall, I know you've got some questions.
Yeah, just thinking aloud, it sounds like Mr. Kenyon is maybe almost at the point, but not quite at the point of making a formal recommendation to us to support at least a temporary closure, at least a couple of thoughts on that. I think it would be nice to have a proposed term of the closure, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever. And then, of course, giving us the option to curtail it or extend it as circumstances dictate. But, I'd rather see it time specific rather than completely open-ended. And then, frankly, not to pick on the Forest Service, but I'm just thinking of our dealings with certain federal and state agencies through the years. I'm not surprised to hear from Mr. Kenyon that he hasn't been able to get a yes or no out of the Forest Service. So just a suggestion that maybe if we reach the point of passing a resolution for a closure, that we maybe say, this will become effective in, say, 45 days unless an official protest is received from one of the two remaining landowners. We already know that we have Weyerhaeuser's support. And by the way, I'd say it would be nice for the record to have that in writing. I mean, I know there's been a pretty strong verbal statement here, but just for our records, I think that would be nice too. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobson.
I would just add that I think if we did a temporary or extended a temporary road closure, that we need to get that at least through next winter. I just don't think it's done doing its thing, whatever that thing is. So, I don't think that reevaluation, as Commissioner Hall kind of presented, I don't think that reevaluation should sort of take place until after next year's wet season.
I would also like to add, as far as the agencies that have been involved, we've been very involved with the Oregon Department of Forestry on this. When we started talking about fire closures, we wanted to make sure that they would still have adequate response to that upper drainage. And they basically understood, said that they had other routes to respond, and that they didn't see it as being a huge problem with this closure as far as their fire basically prevention.
My thoughts, I think, are similar to my fellow commissioners. I guess I question the rationale behind a closure with an end date, when the reality is we're closing the road because of the risk of a landslide. And until that risk goes away, we probably would want to keep the road closed. So I don't know how you balance those two issues, but I think certainly that and support from the other involved landowners would be valuable.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Commissioner Hall.
Yeah, I mean, I said temporary because Mr. Kenyon said temporary. I mean, if we wanted to make it a permanent closure order and then some circumstance, I mean, it seems pretty clear given the limited access use of this road. And I can't even begin to imagine what the work would cost to stabilize that hillside, that it's not within the realm of even remotely practical possibility that we would have the desire or the resources to invest that amount of money. But if we wanted to just call it a permanent closure, and then if some circumstance, which I don't think any of us can imagine at this point, led us to want to reconsider that decision, I guess there's nothing that would prevent us from doing that at some future date. So I'm willing to go along with whatever the board consensus is, and staff consensus, of course.
Well, I think what I was trying to say is I think, the the nuances in the wording of the closure. And I guess my thoughts would be, Director Kenyon, work with County Council and come back with some recommendation as far as terminology of the closure, which would probably define the length of the closure, and something that addresses support from the fellow landowners, recognizing that if I heard correctly, there really are no residents, there's no people living up on this section of road. So that certainly, I think, is an important factor.
Yes, that is true. There are no residents involved. There's only 3 property owners involved. And I totally agree with Commissioner Jacobson. Whatever closure we do, it should at least carry through until about this time next year. If history repeats itself, we're calling for a fairly dry summer and fall this year. And I believe it was 2015, 14, somewhere in there, we had similar circumstances that were then followed by extremely heavy rains. So if Mother Nature is consistent, we're going to get dumped on come this winter, and it'll be interesting to see how the slide actually reacts to getting saturated again. So I will work with legal counsel to put together a proposal for you guys to look at next week.
Okay, before you go, Susan, I have a question for you. I don't know how long you've worked with Weyerhaeuser, but my good friend from Whitman College, Sandy McDade, was general counsel for many years.
Oh, that's great. Yes. I believe she has retired or moved on at this point.
No, you've
Yeah,
good
that's
friend
great
from
too.
Whitman College. All right, if there's nothing more, you'll get back to us, Director Kenyon, and work with County Council, and we'll move on to the next agenda item.
All righty. Thank you.
And thank you for your presentation, Susan. It's very informative.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right,
Talk with you later. Thank you. Bye.
no, bye now. All right, now we'll move on to our next discussion item, which is the Lincoln County Enterprise Zone, and that's presented by Paul Schutema. Schutema? I don't know, Paul. I call you Paul.
Just call me
Anyhow.
Paul.
Who is the Executive Director of the Lincoln County Economic Alliance Foundation.
Yes, thank you very much and good afternoon. And what we're going to talk about is the redesignation process for the Lincoln County Enterprise Zone. And are all the commissioners kind of relatively up to speed with what an enterprise zone is and what it does? Okay, I've got a thumbs up, couple thumbs ups. So I won't spend too much time on that. As you might know, a number of zones in the state, and there are 56 rural enterprise zones in the state of Oregon, and we're a rural enterprise zone. A number of those are sunsetting on June 30th, 2021. And we have, ours is one of those zones. I serve as the zone manager. Enterprise zones are a locally sponsored program, but it's administered through Business Oregon. And the zones are designated by the state legislature. And really it's been underutilized, say, in the past 5 or 6 years, but it can become a very powerful business attraction and expansion incentive, and one that I hope that we can get redesignated and market that opportunity for businesses to look at. Maybe the time is right for some expansion or some attraction into the area. And basically, just quick touch points on how the enterprise zone works. Never for an enterprise zone application that a business sets in, no taxing bodies lose any real estate taxes. It is a short-term temporary exemption of real estate taxes and business personal property taxes for an increment. So if someone has a $250,000 facility and they invest an additional $200,000 in it, it's that assessed increment that gets relieved. And really, the stipulations are that there needs to be a minimum investment of $50,000. The employment within that area of the zone for the applicant has to increase by at least 10%. And simultaneously, there can't be concurrent job losses in another facility elsewhere in the state. And they have to maintain that employment level that they set on their application. If an application is submitted by a business, and like the last one that went through was Dow Disposal, that was putting together a new facility to help with GP's Juno project. They go through an approval process. I help them see if they are, if they qualify for this exemption, walk them through the application process. We have a consultation with the county assessor's office. And if all is good, we sign off on that and send it to the state. But in order to claim those exemptions, the company has to submit every year before April 1st, basically their desire to claim those exemptions and be able to prove that they made that investment and kept those job numbers there. So there are some checks and balances in there. So our zone, it is one of the more complicated ones in the state, just because we've got a complicated, long county. So for our enterprise zone, which basically goes from Lincoln City in the north down to the south of Waldport currently, we have a number of sponsoring governmental units, the city of Lincoln City, the city of Toledo, the city of Waldport, the Port of Newport, Lincoln County itself, the Port of Alsea, the Port of Toledo, and the city of Newport. Currently, the Port of Alsea, Port of Toledo, and the city of Newport are what they call consenting governmental units, which means they agree, they adopt a resolution, but they're not that actively involved. There isn't much functional difference between being a sponsor and a consent. We are talking to Newport about moving themselves from consent to sponsor, which makes sense for a city. And we've also talked to Select that's interested in joining our zone. And I've also talked with Yahats, and they are not interested. I'm trying to get some answer out of Depot Bay. So basically, the way the zone works, it's non-contiguous, but it has to be a certain width and height, the bounding trapezoid. We have an exemption because our county is so long north and south to go beyond the 25-mile limit. But the total area of the zone right now, when it gets redesignated, would have to be 15 square miles or less. The last time there was any movement in the zone or any additional properties added in, the limit was 12 square miles. So our zone currently sits at 11.89 square miles. So we have a little extra territory to play with if we want to. The redesignation process is similar, but a little simpler than the initial designation process. The steps are, we indicate to the state that we're trying to seek a redesignation, which we've done. I meet with the state to review the redesignation process, which has happened. I work and meet with the different sponsoring governmental units to answer any questions and get them up to speed. And I've met with all the sponsoring units right now. And I did meet with the county with Kristen Yule, Joe Davidson, Ono Husing, and John O'Leary at the end of April to kind of go over the process. And we also prepared a draft resolution for that. Other things that have to happen is we host an online informational meeting, not a public hearing, but an informational meeting for the taxing bodies that aren't sponsors. So those are like school district, library district, fire districts, just to listen, to answer any questions, and to kind of explain the process to them. That's happening on June 3rd. And most of that meeting is basically explaining no property taxes are going to be taken away. It's only it's a temporary exemption, short-term exemption on future, on investments and improvements. And then once all the resolutions are in place, which usually those would get voted on around mid-June, we'd work with the county GIS folks to create a GIS map from the stuff that comes in from the different sponsoring entities. There's a redesignation application, which is just us gathering things together that we put together, and then we submit all those materials to the state to have this zone basically continue on. Most zone redesignations in the past have been for 10 years. This would be for 4 years because the entire state program sunsets on June 30th, 2025. Odds are there's going to be some motions or movement from the legislature probably in the next 2 years or so to either tweak the program, expand the program, or have some other kind of incentive like this. And I've spoken to Senator Anderson about this. And just a couple of things, and then I'll take some questions, is that what's eligible, the enterprise zones are more based to incentivize manufacturing, processing, shipping, storage, electricity designation, recycling, maintenance, laboratory testing, software development, things like that. And also value-added ag processes, agricultural, timber, blue economy stuff. Those are also eligible in the enterprise zone process for the exemptions. What's not eligible are retail sales, food service, tourism attraction, childcare, healthcare, professional services, financial services, construction, real estate, things like that. The other thing, and then I will take some questions, is there is an option, and this option can be acted upon by each sponsoring governmental unit, not consenting units, but sponsoring units, to say that hotel expansions or constructions can be eligible for enterprise zone benefits, of course, if they meet the other criteria. We're kind of recommending that because it's good to have as many blades in that incentive Swiss Army knife as possible. And really the next step after this informational meeting would be working with county staff at properties, the unincorporated properties that are currently in the zone. Do all of those make sense to stay in there? There's really no penalty if they stay, but are there any properties that we want to add to it? And I know of one outside of Toledo that is not in the city limits, but it's a place within their urban growth boundaries that they would like to potentially try to incentivize a hotel to come. So that's one thing that would probably be added under the Lincoln County section of that. And that's sort of the, I will also say that it is a rather medieval and cumbersome incentive, but it will not make a bad project good, but it certainly can maybe tip the scales to choosing to invest here rather than elsewhere, or to expand now rather than later. So I guess with that, I will see, are there any questions from the commissioners on the process or what we're trying to do here?
I'll let Commissioner Jacobson go first.
Okay.
Thanks, Commissioner. I have several questions, but I guess just to start, when it comes to the unincorporated parts of the county, because I know there's enterprise zones right throughout the county, several in cities, but when it comes to the unincorporated parts and where there's enterprise zones, what success have we had in those unincorporated areas, specifically to these enterprise zones in business development, like in the last 5 years?
In the last 5 years in unincorporated areas, there have been no applications. The activity that's happened in the enterprise zone over the last 5 years has been Rogue Brewery in Newport has taken advantage of for numerous expansions. Fish People that used to be located in Toledo took advantage of that. And the most current one that we just approved an application back in March was for doll disposal as part of that Juno project with GP. So I guess I would say, riffing off of that, Commissioner Jacobson, one of my goals is to have an informational campaign out to the business community to let them know that this incentive's out there, and let them know that these tools are available to the businesses for expanding, because we should have more activity.
Okay, thanks. That's my question for now. I'll let the other commissioners ask their questions.
Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Paul. Okay, so then, given the lack of activity in the unincorporated areas, would the main argument for us to continue as a sponsor would be to essentially help maintain the trapezoid, so to speak, that I understand this has to be contiguous, right? You just can't have a few cities as their own little islands. Is that correct?
No, there's a bounding trapezoid, which is basically the extent of all the points, but it is piecemeal within that.
Okay.
So, for example, the city of Waldport, they just passed their resolution last week. They are opting, and it was the same as in the past, they're opting, their entire city limits are in the enterprise zone, and that covers their industrial park. Lincoln City takes a different approach, and they have basically a list of about 65 specific property IDs that are in the enterprise zone. So there's different ways that you can describe what that would be. Really what you're looking at for the county is, are there properties out there that have commercial development potential? And this basically attaches to it an additional incentive to hopefully see some development there. But it's not like you make the enterprise zone and build it and they will come. There has to be a little activity to get people knowing about that also as well.
Okay, so just to absolutely clarify, our decision to continue or not continue will not have any impact on the continued participation of Lincoln City, Newport, and Waldport. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. It just means there can't be unincorporated properties in the enterprise zone.
Understood. I know I was in office when we made the original application, but the years do go by quickly. Do you have at hand when we originally sought, and the year we sought and received this designation?
I think it was in the mid-90s was the initial designation.
Wow, okay, even before I was in office. I knew it had been a long time.
And then there was a redesignation in 2010.
Yep.
Okay. And at that point, there was an application for an e-commerce rider on the enterprise zone, which was not, that was a competitive process where the enterprise, that was the last activity.
Okay, thank you. Another question, you said no loss of property taxes to the governing entity, which I was aware of and which I like. I also like the fact that, unlike some economic development tax incentive programs, there is a requirement of job creation attached with this one. But I'm just wondering, what, if anything, is the downside? I mean, I'm not asking you to speak for the city of Yachats, for example, but I'm wondering if they gave any kind of justification for their decision not to participate.
I think when I was talking to the mayor of Yachats, their sense was that the types of businesses that the enterprise zone is designed to support isn't necessarily in where they see themselves growing. And they did not seem interested when I was talking to them about small scale manufacturing. And I was trying to do a pretty good sales pitch on that because I think there is some opportunity in small scale manufacturing or software development, especially with, if you could have a studio and some remote workers and build a facility. I'm with you, Commissioner Hall. I don't really see a downside to this. And what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to get less property taxes for, not that I'm getting right now, but less of an increment for a short period of time in order to say, yes, I want growth that leads directly to job creation in Lincoln County. And to me, I would take that bet all day, every day.
Okay, I think that's the questions I have at this time. Thank you.
All right, clarifying the tax question, it's like urban renewal. Correct, Paul, in that you forego the taxes on the incremental value of the development until a certain period of time.
Correct. But those taxes don't go into like a TIF fund that can then be reinvested. It's a relief benefit to incentivize the business. And a standard exemption is 3 years. If they go for a standard exemption, which all the current ones are, they go through the zone manager and the county assessor's office. If they're looking for a 4 or a 5 year exemption, they have to go before the sponsoring entity of where that property is to basically plead their case for, I would like an extra year than this, or 2 years than the standard exemption. That hasn't happened in the last 5 years.
Okay. Then going back to Commissioner Jacobson's question, which businesses have taken advantage of this enterprise zone in the unincorporated areas? You mentioned Dahl.
And that's
I think
not
Road.
Yeah, nothing in the unincorporated areas
Okay.
as of right now.
Okay,
It's Newport, Toledo, and Waldport right now.
Which then answers my next question. I would think that the sponsoring entity would have to approve the opening or the use of the enterprise zone by a business because of the tax implications. So I wasn't aware that the county had approved it. That's why I was asking.
Yep.
Okay, and I guess the last question I would have is there any direct cost to the county to renew this enterprise zone?
No, there is no cost at all. There is an option, and urban enterprise zones sometimes do this, where you have the right by state statute to charge an application fee if you want to recover some management costs. Generally, the more rural zones don't do that. Ours currently does not have that. There's not any costs because you want to make it as easy as possible. And we want to market this as a come here and do business incentive, not like write us a check for $5,000 before we talk.
Okay. All right. I'm guessing that at this point, Paul, you work with county council to draft, do we want a resolution or an order, some document that I sense we have a consensus to move forward?
Well, we've already got a draft document in the meeting packet, don't we?
Yep.
So if everybody's in agreement, I'd just favor moving that forward as a decision action item next week.
Well, one thing, pushing back on that a little bit, by the enterprise zone statutes, we have to have our informational meeting before the vote happens on it. So it would probably be a couple meetings down the road, just to make sure that we're dotting all our I's and crossing all of our T's. But I'll work with the county council to get that properly on the schedule when it follows all the proper rules. Generally, you've got a meeting like this where we talk about it to the council or the commissioners, and then at a later date after the public information meeting, there's a vote, and that gives the non-sponsoring taxing bodies a chance to make any questions or have any, if they've got any worries about this zone. The last time that happened in 2010, there were no comments. I don't really anticipate any. I've answered some questions of the other taxing bodies, but everyone seems fine with it.
All right, so at this point, Paul, you'll work with the county council to prepare a document when you've gone through your process And it'll come before this board prior to June 30, which, if I remember correctly, is the deadline.
Yes, you are absolutely correct.
All right.
And
Anything
thank you
else
very
from my fellow commissioners on this item? All right. Go forth, Paul.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
All right, we'll move forward in the agenda. Next item would be the public health COVID-19 update. And we have our interim director of public health with us. Florence, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners and everybody. Oh, let's do this. COVID-19 update, May 17. You can scroll down, please. All right, so this is the epic curve for the state of Oregon since November 1st. And you'll see our epic curve is quite similar. So we saw this peak in April, which I find it really interesting to see it in perspective compared to last fall, just because even though that was a surge, that was less significant surge. And now we're trending down statewide. So that's very encouraging. You can scroll down. Okay, so specifically for Lincoln County, so like I was saying, and we have a similar epic curve for the county. It's the second graph. At this time, we're so past mid-month, and we are at 35 cases so far, which is really encouraging for the county. You can scroll down. So the cases are trending down. The testing is also trending down this past week, even though we're still anticipating some results to coming for tests that were conducted late last week. We're still seeing a trend downwards. You can scroll down. All right, so this is the exciting part. So because we're trending down, we're now barely in moderate, and we're crossing the fingers that we will be able to make it to low by the end of this week. And I'll discuss this a little bit later on, but you know, I think we're really doing wonderful, and this is very exciting to see those numbers really flirting with low just on that graph. You can scroll down. Thank you. So, you know, like those past board meetings, we've been talking about the type of variants we've been seeing. So we continue to see B117 as kind of like one of the major variants, and we have seen the first two cases with a variant coming from India this past week. So that's the new variant of concern that the World Health Organization had identified last week. We talked about it last week, and so the two first cases have been identified in Region 1. So that's a variant that still, you know, is being studied quite a lot, possibly more transmissible, and also maybe not as the vaccine might not be as effective against it, but there is still more data to be collected and analyzed. Next slide. Oh, back up. Thank you. So as I alluded to earlier, there are new state metrics that have been discussed by the governor last week. So they are as follows. So counties that have vaccinated at least 65% of their eligible population. And in eligible population, we are going to remain with age 16 and older, even though the 12 and older are now eligible to receive the Pfizer vaccine. We may be able to go into the low risk level permanently. And so in order for Lincoln County to move to low risk, we were required to submit a vaccination equity plan, which we did this morning. We did on Friday, and then there were a few additional questions that were asked of us, and we resubmitted this morning. So we will now wait to hear back from the state as to what is going to happen as early as Friday if we were to move.
So to clarify, Florence, if I may, the county has reached we have exceeded the 65% of our eligible population being vaccinated, and we have submitted the vaccination equity plan. Hats off to you and staff that I know worked very hard to get the initial report submitted to the state last Friday. And then there were some questions raised that I know you and staff worked hard to get that plan resubmitted by 11 a.m. this morning. So assuming that plan is now accepted by the state, and we've exceeded the 65% vaccination ratio, we can expect to have the county moved into the low risk category permanently, and that would be effective this Friday if we meet the two criteria that we've discussed, correct?
That is absolutely correct. I just want to add one little caveat, which is we just discovered this afternoon when the data sets that the state has been using seems to be evolving a little bit when it comes to numbers. So you'll see that based on the population, eligible population number that the OHA had been using until today, or maybe the 10th, or no, until today, they've just mentioned on the website that they were changing their population. Anyway, so it means that the vaccination rate has changed a little bit. However, so the vaccination rate is calculated based on data that is imputed into the alert system, right, which is the state vaccination system. Not every entity that has been vaccinating Lincoln County residents input the data in the system. And like, for example, the VA is not adding that data. So if we take all the data that is in the system plus I think it's like 560 more vaccinations, that puts us over the 65%. Okay, but you know what I mean? Like one is, I think we are at 64.2, and the other one we're at 65.5. And I'm at this time not clear as to what is going to be the exact calculation that OHA is going to use.
Okay, well, my understanding from conversation, in conversation with the governor last week, chairs of the counties were participants. The vaccinations given by tribes, VA, others are included in that calculation. So
okay, so then
we'll be okay. But I guess, will we know tomorrow, or when will we know?
This is a good question. I do not know.
All right, well,
I can ask.
We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yes.
All right, back to you.
Thank you. So the other new state metrics is when, as a state, we reach 70% of people age 16 and older vaccinated, then most restrictions would be lifted, which is also really exciting. Next slide. Okay, so this is exactly what we were talking about, right? And so, see, this is what I was discussing. If you look at the box that says alert data, so alert is the database, age 16 and older, they had been operating with the 41,413, and it has changed to 41,620. I mean, it's a very tiny differences, right? But that makes a little bit of a difference in the percentage. So fingers crossed that we will make it this week. We've done everything we can at this time. Next slide. Okay, so this is our little calendar, for the clinics that are happening this week. A few things of note. So all those clinics are welcoming walk-ins. As you can see, we have a few options between Moderna and Pfizer. We have our regular, county fairgrounds, Thrift Fire Station. Eddyville Charter School is also holding a clinic on Thursday that is not only open to their students, the parents of the students, and anybody in the community who would want to come get a vaccine. So that's exciting. On Friday, there's going to be the usual Samaritan clinic. Yahat, we will offer Johnson & Johnson in the afternoon. We're doing a second dose Pfizer clinic, but we're also offering J&J for people who are interested in to walk in and get a vaccine. Next slide. And maybe before I go there, I just wanted to add a few things. This week is exciting too, because we are starting a partnership with the schools and the school district. And so because Pfizer has been made available to 12 and older, we have a clinic tomorrow at Wildfire with the middle and high school. We have another clinic on Thursday in Toledo at the junior and senior school, on Friday at Taft, and on Monday of next week in Newport. And so we will offer the Pfizer vaccine, and we're really hoping that parents are gonna take this opportunity to get the kiddos vaccinated before the end of school year. So I think this is mostly what is happening this week in terms of clinic. Any questions? No, go ahead. Okay. All right, so a few other changes. There have been some adjustment to guidance for various sector, eating and drinking establishments, and then you can scroll to the next slide, please. Indoor entertainment, indoor recreation and fitness, outdoor entertainment. The guidance is loosening a little bit. Next slide. Okay, and the big one, the mask guidance, right? So that was a surprise a little bit for the state, I think, last week, and maybe for a lot of people. So these talking points are coming from the conversation we had on Friday with the state health officer. And so, as you know, the new CDC guidance eliminates the requirements for people who are fully vaccinated to wear a mask and comply with physical distancing in most settings. And Oregon is aligning with the guidance. So I just want to remind people about what fully vaccinated means. It means that you've had your 2 shots if you were getting the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, or you had your 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson, and then 2 weeks have gone by after your second dose. So this is what fully vaccinated means. So as I mentioned, like the guidance came a little bit sooner than expected by the health authority, but it's still very much grounded in data. Next slide. All right, so there are still some exceptions to this guidance, and so masks are still required in public transportation, so a plane, a train, a bus, a subway, in hospitals, in healthcare clinics and settings, in correctional facilities, in long-term care facilities, at school, and also where it's required by law or the workplace. Next slide. Thank you. So businesses can choose to continue to require mask and physical distancing for all. It's really a choice. And also businesses that choose to allow employees and staff who are vaccinated to not wear a mask will need to check the vaccination status of their staff. But it doesn't need to record that they have checked. Next slide. All right, so that's also another interesting question. Are employers allowed to ask employees about their vaccination status? And according to the EEOC, yes, an employer can do that. However, the employer cannot ask any follow-up questions. Have you been vaccinated for COVID? Yes, no, that. And so there is a link to the frequently asked questions. So we thought that was an important information to put out there for people and employers to know. Next slide.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, could I call another question at this point, please, for Florence? So this covers what employers can and can't do, but for, I know we've had some questions to our office, and I'm sure everywhere else. What about, say, retail service businesses open to the public? If they choose to lift their mask restrictions, are they essentially on an honor system with their customers? Can they choose to ask to see their vaccination card, or is that all up to the individual business?
So I'm unaware of any specific guidance yet on this question. So I would tend to say that it is up to the individual business. But like I said, we haven't had any very clear guidance from anyone really yet. I think they're working hard on this.
I think the state is working to provide guidance, and I'm certainly interested in what they produce. Commissioner Jacobson?
Yeah, I believe on the statement that the state and the governor put out, I think it was late Friday afternoon, with relation to this guidance coming out from the CDC. I think it was said that in the state statement that they will be working on business guidance. And I was just curious, Commissioner Hunt, since you were on the call with the governor representing us, I think on that same day on Friday, is there a timeline of when that additional business guidance may come out from the state?
My call with the governor was earlier in the week, and that wasn't discussed.
Never mind then. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
I just throw in, I know that this is way above all of our grades, but I really think the CDC would have done the whole country a big service by having, some kind of guidance and plan to address these questions before they announce this decision, but it is what it is and we'll all deal with it.
And be sure that as soon as we receive word from the Oregon Health Authority, we'll pass it on.
Commissioner Jacobson, did you have something more?
Yeah, I would just say I would like to kind of have a conversation today, at least a brief one, about, our own policy regarding the courthouse and other county buildings. If we can go ahead and let Florence finish her presentation and maybe pick that up if that's all right with you, Chair Hunt.
Sure.
I believe I might be finished. Can you scroll down? Oh, nope. So we're expecting guidance, right? And so possibly, I believe it was either today or last Friday, and within the next couple of days, we can anticipate more communication on these changes. And like I said earlier, we will communicate as soon as we have the information. Next slide. Oh, and this was a conversation about, well, let's say I'm not vaccinated, but I got COVID before and I show a history of antibodies. Does that mean that I can remove my mask? And the answer is no at this time. It's, we don't know yet what antibody means in terms of protection. And so we recommend vaccination, and the ability to not wear a mask in most public setting is only linked to being fully vaccinated at this time. And I believe that's it. I think this is the last one.
One more slide.
One more slide. There you
Question. All right. Any other questions or comments for Florence?
I just want to, say another big thank you, to public health, to hopefully getting us over that 65% line. I mean, certainly we needed arms, willing to get vaccinated, but we also, I think from the very, very beginning of vaccine distribution, just really hit the ground running, and we're very innovative and had great partnerships. And I think all of that allowed us to get where we're at now, where if we don't make it this week, we'll certainly be there next week because we are so dang close. So just a big thank you to you, Florence, and your whole team, and all of our partners at Samaritan and Pac West Ambulance and fire departments and schools and everybody else kind of making that work to get us there. And we were doing that before we really knew that there was going to be this reward of getting a low risk, right? But because of all that, we're hopefully there, or like I said, we'll be there in the following week. The other comment I just have about ongoing vaccination efforts, and I already sent this idea to Amy this morning, but I'm a newly minted soccer parent, which, wow, for all of you soccer parents out there, it's a lot. But I will say I was at my child's soccer game this weekend. Multiple games kind of take place at the same time, and lots of parents and people and siblings and all of that. And I think it would be an awesome idea to do a mobile clinic during one of those multi-game events. People are there to have the audience, as long as they can, watch the games while they're doing their 15 minutes of observation. I think that would be a great time to get some people done, and frankly, some people that might be harder to get otherwise. So there's my idea for a Monday.
That sounds great. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, I would just add, as I indicated earlier, I know staff was hard at work on Friday getting the plan submitted, and I know it required your signature, Florence, and Dr. Long's signature in addition to my own. So it was a team effort. It took a lot of time, and then I know, again, took a lot of time and commitment from staff this morning. So thank you all, and as has already been indicated, the reason we're where we're at is because of a lot of hard work through public health, our partners, the hospitals, and the volunteers that got us in position to be able to reach this milestone. So good work to all.
Thank you.
All right, now Commissioner Jacobson, you wanted to discuss mask policy, I guess, in view of the CDC's announcement.
Yeah, I know we've all probably received a lot of constituent input, about businesses and that kind of stuff. And since that was a state order around businesses and the state mask policy, unfortunately, I can wait for guidance there. But we still have a ordinance internally for our own employees inside county buildings. And I know staff, Casey and others have gotten some inquiries in about, our policy inside the courthouse and other buildings. So I feel like we should at least start the discussion on that. I will say just my 2 cents is, probably waiting for some additional guidance to come out specifically to courts, because I'm not sure where they're going to fall, if more guidance is coming out for courts or not, which is a state function inside a county building. I also just want to be really thoughtful, I guess. So I'm not asking for any decision today. I just kind of wanted to bring it up and see where everyone was at and maybe what more information we need or are waiting for.
Commissioner Hall.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Jacobson makes an excellent point, and I think to the extent possible, I would like to see our policy coordinated with the court's policy. I think a lot of people, don't realize that other county offices, that's a county function, but state courts are a unit of state government and they operate under their own rules. And I think potentially it could cause a lot of confusion if the two policies aren't consistent. But I agree, now is the time for us to begin thinking about this and setting a policy direction, when appropriate.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is certainly I think there are many factors involved, certainly state guidance, consistency with what the courts are doing within our building, but also what the policy, how it applies to other county buildings that don't necessarily have the courts in them. Last thing I'd say is I think Sheriff Landers probably should be a part of that conversation, since they are responsible for security in the courthouse building, and probably would have HR involved too. So I think we've got a starting point. We'll get some guidance from the state, and then we can see what seems to best meet the needs of our facilities and our employees and our citizens too. Anything more? I'm sure this will be coming back to us for further discussion.
Mr. Chair, could I request a very brief break? I mean, like literally 2 minutes.
You may do that. We will recess. I show that it is 4:40, so let's come back at 4:42. Well, 4:43. We're recessed till 4:43. All right, I show 4:43, so I will reconvene the regular meeting of Lincoln County Board of Commissioners. And next item on our agenda is the Echo Mountain Complex Fire Update. I believe, Casey, you're going to start, and then Commissioner Jacobson will provide the wrap-up, huh?
Yeah, I think so. Katie, and then we might have some comments from Roy today as well. You know, I thought just for introductory comments, yes, I'm Casey Miller, Public Information Officer. And, you know, it really has been our mission to restore the survivors of North County. We've been at this quite a while, and right now, what that looks like is internally, you know, we meet twice a month, our recovery team. And there was a time when we met more frequently than that. Your emergency management department is on a statewide recovery call. They now meet twice a month. That's sort of their tempo. We meet with FEMA twice a month, and you know, we're still very much engaged in doing whatever we can to the degree that we have control over the things county government can do, and then our sphere of influence to help North County recover. And our internal team, for those who might be watching this right now or who are on our meeting, who don't typically maybe hear these reports, which we do every week, members from our planning department, sometimes FEMA shows up. Of course, the commissioners are on that meeting. I am as public information, our behavioral health team and environmental health sometimes jumps on those meetings. You know, earlier in recovery, they were frequently on those meetings. And then of course, emergency management, sheriff's office participate in those meetings every 2 weeks for us to make progress. So with that being said, there are just a few things I kind of wanted to highlight. Since last week, one of the things we got note from FEMA about they're calling it a re-engagement event that they want to do. And we don't know the exact specifics yet, but it looks like potentially a 4-day workshop, you might call it, where folks have the opportunity to re-engage FEMA. And it's interesting because, you know, FEMA, I think very early on, we discovered that they're aware of their own bureaucracy and kind of how massive they are and how many hurdles it might feel like sometimes folks need to jump through to engage FEMA. So it looks like we're going to have an event. We don't know exactly all the particulars yet, but that is coming. And that's an opportunity for folks to ask questions and work through any issues they have with FEMA. So I would say look for that coming soon. You know, our behavioral health team, CORE, is up in North Lincoln County and doing their outreach. And one of the things that they've got coming is some testimonials from wildfire survivors. I think those are going to be very powerful when we start to see what those stories look like. They're also working with a nonprofit that's called Lines for Life. And there is a lifeline phone number that folks can call. That's 1-800-273-8255. So that's just one of the many things that CORE has been doing in North County. And then I did want to say, you know, we are beginning to talk about the anniversary of the Echo Mountain Fire event and you know, what that looks like for the community and survivors. And I think as we are engaging in our wildfire readiness presentations, Katie mentioned that last week. I think Sheriff touched on that as well, that we are really in wildfire season, and we're engaging in our annual Readiness presentations, and they're really pretty extensive. These are live events that you can join via Zoom, or you can watch the recorded versions of these events. And I think really, really important and kind of interesting too that, we're still trying to restore that community, and yet here they have to think about preparing for the current season. So that I would imagine, could be very difficult for some individuals. So the presentations, one is, for example, is tonight. There'll be one on Wednesday. There's 6 areas, topic areas, and then there's an event with each fire district. And I'll tell you, I've been participating in those, and I'm definitely learning things. So there's a lot of dimensions to wildfire preparation, and I would say go to the county's website. You'll find the icons and the text for those events. I think everyone really needs to try to take a little time and look at those best practices. So I just wanted to give a shout out for the wildfire presentations. It's kind of amazing. We're coming up on that year anniversary, but I think we should be just out of finishing up that 2-week pause for the debris cleanup. When we started the pause, I believe there were 16 properties left of those ROEs that had been submitted. So I'm sure Roy will have a few more details about that. But yeah, and another thing I wanted to mention too, handing it over to Katie, is, it really is awesome, for example, that Katie is in Otis every week. And that really gives us, an intimate connection that we wouldn't have otherwise. Paul Seitz was up in North County very frequently. I think Katie being there every week really allows her to tap into what's happening with the community, and just props to Katie for that. And I would say with that, Katie, I know you're working on a lot of financial opportunities, and maybe you can take it from here.
All right.
Thanks, Casey. I have really enjoyed actually being up there despite the circumstances, have made really nice connections with several people, and it sort of feels like going to see family every week at this point. So really enjoyed the community up there. So just some updates from my end. For those of you that have not been up there in a while, I would highly suggest going up there and doing that. There are some areas in that Otis community, some neighborhood that I would say, this is Katie's like back of the envelope calculation, so don't quote me exactly, but I would say maybe like 30% of the homes are actually back up or in process. Maybe their manufactured homes are there, but they haven't had occupancy approval yet, but they're on site. And that's a big thanks to early cleanup efforts led by volunteers and people helping their neighbors. And also kind of the unsung heroes behind the scenes in that is our planning department, who touched every single one of those homes as they went through that permitting process. I know they kept track and still do keep track of all of those permits and color code them so they don't lose them in the process, and really make a priority to get those permits through. So it is really looking nice up there in certain areas. Funding wise, we still have several state sources pending, 2 different bills, one that awaits a governor's signature and one is still going through process. One is kind of just funding for us. The other one includes funding for us, but is tied up with funding for different wildfire impacted communities, as well as requests for state funding for certain agencies to help us as well. So that one is still pending. Also last week I heard news that had partial success on a grant I went after through the Roundhouse Foundation to help kind of restore the Salmon River Grange. That's kind of a one-stop shop for survivors, kind of a Walmart, if you will, but everything is free for survivors. And it is a 100-plus-year-old building, and literally is sagging at the weight of what this building is being asked to do currently. So the building survived the fire, but is not surviving the recovery process. Literally, the weight of the food, the clothing, the dishes, the towels, etc., is hurting this building. So I've been trying to piece together some funding sources to literally keep that building together, and received a $25,000 grant from Roundhouse last week. So I'll be working with the Grange on trying this summer to get, especially we can find some additional funding to cost match to hopefully get that building raised up and leveled so it can continue to do the work that it needs to do. Let's see, I would just also, I guess, say a reminder that there still is kind of opportunities out there for people. One is there's still money available through Northwest Oregon Works to hire impacted persons, so people that were either COVID impacted or wildfire impacted, to have them do recovery work. So Northwest Oregon Works kind of provides the funding for that. So I know the school district has accessed that, Lincoln County has accessed that, some of our nonprofits have accessed that funding. So there still is dollars available if anyone's out there and listening and involved in recovery work. There also is still a need for volunteers. I think as time goes on, maybe people think there's not, or we just kind of move on with their lives if we weren't directly impacted. But there still is a need for volunteers at the Salmon River Grange with Landscaping with Love. And also we now have our long-term recovery group that is up and operating. This is made up of various nonprofits in the county, both for recovery work on Echo Mountain Fire, but also as kind of creating an organization to help us with recovery work on the next one. Knock on wood, I hope we don't have a next one, but we now have this social kind of structure in place to work through that. So there's room for individuals to volunteer, and there's room for nonprofits to still get involved as well. So just kind of reminders on those fronts. And that's all the updates I have for right now.
All right, Director Kenyon, is there anything you would add?
Actually, no. I don't really have anything new. Things are still kind of holding. Commissioner Jacobson was talking about the number of homes that are going in up there in the Echo Mountain Fire area. And I kind of am able to keep tabs on that firsthand, because every time they move in a section of manufactured home, I get a request to approve the over-dimension permit. And I know for a fact that I've approved 3 of them today. So that's three more homes that are going in. And I know end of last week I was doing a couple of days. So things are moving.
That's wonderful.
All right, Commissioner Hall, comments or questions?
I think this is all very encouraging news. My kudos to county staff and others who are supporting the great work of the community in recovery. And I know, it's going to be a long, long journey. I remember one of the conversations I had not long after the event with Ken Murphy, who oversees emergency management for Lincoln City. I believe previously was Director of State Emergency Management, and also was with FEMA as well. And he said, you have to think of recovery from an event of this magnitude on a 2-year minimum time frame and up to 10 years. So I think the community realizes that this is a long haul kind of situation, and hopefully they know that the county and the other partners will be right with them as long as it takes.
Okay, the only thing I would add is, again, echo the comments that have already been shared, in that it is a long process. I think the good news is we're out of the immediate recovery, and we're into the long-term recovery. And it will take time, but county is committed. We have resources committed, and special thanks to Commissioner Jacobson. Certainly, being the point person up there is very helpful. So, with that, Casey, anything last comments?
Yeah, I would just add that this week we're having one of our annual tabletop exercises. And that event engages all of our community stakeholders, local jurisdictions. And, one of the things as I was working with the fire chiefs, for example, and Sheriff Landers on our Wildfire Readiness PSA was we have really learned a lot from, the Echo Mountain event. I know this is not the way we want to have professional development, but I mean, it's taught us a lot. And I think, we're even more prepared moving forward. So, I think that's going to be a good event for us, and we're ready for this season. And I guess that's all I would say, other than I'm going to have to leave you and go to the ER, by the way. And so Christy, you're in capable hands with Christy, but I am going to have to leave. Everything's going to be okay, but I do have to run out of here and check in on my kid. So,
All right. So,
yeah.
so good luck on that. But just to clarify, so Christy will handle the YouTube when we go into executive session, and then if we come back into public session, she'll be handling that.
She will. You're in good hands, I promise.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Good luck.
Thanks.
All right. We'll move on to the economic development listening report, and I'll provide just a little bit of background. This was an effort that I think had its initial actions taken prior to COVID. It was something that the Board of Commissioners saw an opportunity to re-envision how economic development is done by the county. And this was one of the first steps. And so I've asked the gentleman here to present the report, and then we'll have an idea of what we heard and how we might proceed to continue in our revisioning process. So I know we have Greg Wolf, who is under contract with the Oregon County Solutions, Frank Burris, who's with the Extension Office at the OSU, and Paul Schutema is back with us from the Economic Alliance. So, gentlemen, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Commissioner Hunt. I'll kick it off. Commissioner Hunt did request that we provide some assistance to him in conducting some listening sessions around the state, around the future economic development in Lincoln County, specifically to assess where citizens and stakeholders saw the public priorities around economic development. And we were able to connect Frank Burris with the Extension Service to help facilitate those sessions with some help from Paul Schutema and myself. For those of you who don't know Frank Burris, and I think most, if not all of you do, he's been very helpful to us on the Oregon Coast Trail, really being the primary staff person to Commissioner Hunt on that endeavor, and also helped us out on tide gates and many other things over the last few years. So we were pleased to be able to get some of his time through County Solutions and through the county, actually, the contract directly. And he did the bulk of the work supporting Commissioner Hunt in his convening role. Commissioner Hunt convened all of these sessions around the county that were conducted. So with that, I think I'll just turn it over to Frank to take us through the report, and I'll come back at the end and offer a couple of thoughts.
Thank you, Greg, for that introduction, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to come and present this information to you. So we conducted 4 listening sessions on November 12th and 13th of 2020, as Greg mentioned, before COVID. We asked all the people that attended 2 different questions. First is, where should we look to rebuild and expand the economic potential of Lincoln County? Second question was, what are the challenges? What partners should we be working with? And what resources are available to accomplish it? So we had those listening sessions run about an hour long. One went slightly over that, but we really wanted to keep it moving to keep the attendees engaged. In the North County, we had 7 participants. In the Central County, we had 12. South County, we had 6. And East County, we had 4. So we obviously broke them up by region. I facilitated all the sessions. Paul Skydema helped with recording participant responses as they gave those responses, and then we used that information for voting to follow up afterwards. So each community leader had a chance to present their ideas on economic development to the commissioner and the people that were attending, and then to identify what the challenges and partnerships and resources were needed to accomplish those priorities. Paul made a list in process of the ideas that were presented so that we could use those to vote at the end of each session. And we gave each participant at least 3 votes. It varied with each region because the more people there were, the more votes we needed. And we came out with top priorities for each region. So I'm not going to identify the top priorities for each region, but I will identify the top priorities overall for countywide. And you can find that information in the study. I believe Commissioner Hunt has given you all a copy of that study.
It's also a part of the packet, the board packet.
Great, awesome, thank you. We ranked all the priorities according to the number of votes that they got, and then we converted them to percentages to account for the fact that there were different number of participants in each region. And then we combined all 4 regions together to come up with an overall average percent or proportion of people that voted for each one of the priorities. So the way the priorities came out were, the first one was workforce/affordable housing, and that got 81% of people across all 4 regions voted for that as a top priority. Broadband development was number 2, and that 64% of all participants voted for that category. And childcare was number 3, and 42% of all participants voted for childcare as one of their top priorities. So there was about 10 identified priorities and then a group of other, and I won't go through all 10 of them or the other group, but you can find that out in the report. So the top 3 were workforce affordable housing, broadband development, and childcare. So if we look at each one of those individually, the workforce affordable housing category, participants really discussed the need to have housing for summertime workers, seasonal workers, low wage service workers, and also for early career professionals such as teachers and doctors. There was a lot of discussion about the short-term rental market and about how housing is being converted to vacation rentals, and therefore driving those housing units out of the rental market and making it difficult for businesses or companies to attract workers because they couldn't find housing in the area. The Newport Area School District reported that they lose approximately 50 teachers a year simply because of the lack of suitable or affordable housing in the area. That's pretty significant impact. So broadband development, the second category, participants saw the need to attract gig economy workers and remote workers, and the only way they can do that is to have good broadband available to them. Telehealth, which was identified as a distinct need in the county in a bunch of different of these sessions, also needs broadband to operate. And the Newport Area School District reported that about 300 kids in the Newport School District don't have broadband or even Wi-Fi. And that was during the 2020-2021 school year. So the third item was affordable and available childcare. Everybody identified the need for affordable, available, and stable childcare. So some of the ideas that came out of the group were utilizing community centers as childcare facilities, developing or providing tax deductions or incentives for businesses that provide daycare for their employees, encouraging larger employees in the region, such as casinos and hospitals, to provide daycare for the children of non-employees to both stabilize their childcare systems and provide better childcare for the community, and encouraging in-home childcare businesses with economic incentives. So those were the three areas that generally that were most supported by the people on these economic development listening sessions. So our suggestion from this is to organize groups, small, nimble, diverse groups, to focus on these three areas. And their job will be to identify practical, achievable, and measurable steps that can be taken to, in the short term, to both diversify economies and create more economically resilient communities. And each group should be able to look for creative ways to work around challenges, identify and connect with partners and collaborators for resources and ideas, people to move these ideas forward. Each group should connect with local, regional, state, and federal resources. We should make sure that each of these groups has a real broad representation from different regions of Lincoln County. The second suggested action is that it's really a note rather than an action. It's that the real industry, the significant industry that thrived during COVID-19 and will continue to thrive from all the reports that I've seen, is the outdoor recreation industry. And the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, Travel Oregon, and the OSU Travel and Visitor Enhancement Program have all identified the fact that we have businesses or outdoor recreation businesses that are doing really well in Oregon as a result of COVID-19. And so I would encourage focus groups, even focus groups that are working on other areas of economic development, to think about how they can provide opportunities, amenities, and infrastructure and support for visitors coming to the county, because it's a significant area of income for all along the coast, coastwide. And also, I suggest that ancillary businesses such as hotels, restaurants, medical facilities, and public and private transportation and guiding services get training to provide customer service and knowledge to the visitors that are arriving on our coast. So in Appendix A, in this report, it lists the people who were actually invited to these listening sessions. Appendix B provides the votes by region, so you can see what the priorities were within a particular region. And Appendix C compiles all of the information from each region, identifies which region it comes from, and then compiles those results by category. So that's the report that I wrote up for this, and I would be willing to take any questions.
Maybe before questions, Paul, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, it was a real pleasure to work with Commissioner Hunt, Greg, and Frank on this. It was a very energized session, and one of the things that struck me was, even though there were some very clear shared priorities, there were also some substantial differences in priorities across the region, which I wasn't fully expecting. My only kind of additional comments, I think Frank's report is absolutely great, and it hits on exactly what we all saw and experienced. I did a report that I submitted to Commissioner Hunt back in December on the listening sessions. It had one extra little area to it that I just want to take my 30 seconds here. Is there are some things that are important for Lincoln County economic development that were not discussed as part of that, and I don't want to lose that. So I wanted to give you some thoughts from a rural economic development practitioner who's been doing this for 12 years. The need for economic development, strategic planning, and the development of a plan of work. I think connecting and collaborating with those groups that Frank was talking about is a huge thing. Developing and implementing a business retention and expansion program. That is the bedrock of professional economic development. We've never had one in Lincoln County. We absolutely need one. We're developing one that we should hope to launch in June. Business attraction and site promotion, that dovetails with some of the things that Frank was saying, is essential. And business development, especially in coordination with the SBDC, there's a lot of different ways that we can dovetail from technical support and connecting them with state programs and access to local and regional capital that we can do on our end, and training and business plan development and marketing plans the SBDC is in great position to do. And also just a plug that I think it's time to think about that Lincoln County Economy Report from 2014 and how we might want to update that data to make sure that we've got the most accurate data possible to help make some of the most informed decisions. So that's just kind of a little riff off of what Frank was saying, but as a great project and great report, great job, Frank.
Thank you. Well, it was fun working with you in this as well.
Yeah, I would just add at this point, I guess frankly, no surprise, the top three areas that we heard from these listening sessions were, housing, broadband, and childcare. I don't think that's a surprise to any of us, but the value that I find in this process and in this report is the fact that, we did have an opportunity to engage individuals, community leaders, business leaders from throughout the county. In effect, get confirmation of what we've all heard and maybe know intuitively. But I think the key is that we got some engagement. Certainly this report provides some tools and some areas that we can focus on. But I'll also say that the COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench, if you will, into the process. And with the availability of state dollars and federal dollars, certainly the, I think, value of this report is enhanced. And then the county has decided to hire a county administrator, and I think this is certainly an area that the county administrator can take this report as a starting point in some of the other efforts that have been done through the availability of state and federal dollars to try to, if you will, pull all these pieces of the puzzle together and come up with a plan as to how does the county want to do economic development, and who are the people to take those different pieces, if you will, and move forward. So those are my thoughts. Commissioner Hall, I see your microphone's green, and I interested in thoughts and comments from either of my fellow commissioners.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, like you, my first thought in reviewing this report is no significant surprises here, although the regional differences are interesting. We've certainly, I think broadband is one that's been steadily moving its way up the list, and certainly the pandemic and then the wildfire aftermath has kicked it as high as it has, and we have known for a long, long time. I mean, I remember my first year in office, 2005, when I was convening sessions on housing, and the school district, Chinook Winds, other employers were identifying it as one of their major, if not their number one, barriers to employee recruitment and retention. And childcare, I know, is not a surprise to any of us. I know it's an issue that Commissioner Jacobson has been working long before she became a commissioner, but just as our unofficial resident historian, my memory goes all the way back to 1996, and when there was some one-time federal stimulus money through the Clinton administration. And, you know, state law was different then. The voters had voted to form our transit district, but not to fund it, which, you know, could not happen under current state law. So we went through, the county went through an extensive public process at the time to see what people identified as the top economic need, and public transit, you know, narrowly emerged on top. And so the money was used to keep the transit program going for a year. But a very close second, even then, was childcare. So certainly these are long-term systemic issues. I think the county can be proud of the leadership that we've taken on these issues, but certainly we need partners at every level, and there's a heck of a lot more work to do on these and other issues as well. My initial thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first off, it's good to see Frank's face. He's a former colleague of mine from Extension, and good to see Greg and Paul as well. So thank you for your work on this. Just a couple of notes, I guess, not so much questions, just comments. One is, I think since this report was actually, well, not the report, but from when the information and discussions have taken place, we actually have made some progress on broadband, and we actually do have a working group that actually have received some money on broadband. And I had a former boss of mine, Jay Rasmussen, who Frank knew, that, man, he would just drill into us the art of timing. You know, you can really want something to happen, but if the timing's not right, it ain't gonna happen. And I think that, you know, COVID sort of gave us good timing on going after some broadband stuff. As everybody was pushed home to do telemedicine, to work from home, to do school, I think that issue finally came to light. And there was finally some money freed up to start working on some of this stuff. So I just want to say that I think there's been progress made just since you did listening sessions. When it comes to what was in the report, the other two items, and actually broadband as well, along with the other two commissioners, I was not surprised. I will just say with Paul's comments about not forgetting, you know, these other things with business development planning and expansion of businesses, I agree those are important, but I would just say that I think childcare and affordable housing absolutely hamstrings us on moving those other things forward. It's very difficult to talk about business expansion and getting more employees if there's no place for them to live or work. And I think we've had some efforts in that county that have fallen short on training and that sort of thing, because there wasn't childcare and there wasn't housing. So I do think it's time for a very strong pivot in this county for us to really start focusing our efforts on these two areas. And, you know, these are things that cost money. Childcare is something I have dove into pretty heartily. And in most cases, not all, because I know someone will correct me, but in most cases, it requires a pretty significant subsidy in order to operate, whether that's, you know, in a facility, or if that's coming from in-home care where the cost of the person's mortgage that they're paying, you know, is the subsidy. So these are significant challenges that it's not just Lincoln County dealing with, kind of the whole state. But I do think it's time we go after that. As far as the approach, you know, I think you had said, Frank, that the recommendation was to create, you know, working groups. You have kind of tangible action items. I think we actually need to look into that a little more, because we actually do have some groups that have already been pretty involved and that do have some tangible things. The problem is, as I said earlier, a lot of this stuff actually costs money to go forward. So it's hard to kind of have tangible things when the funding's sort of not there. And again, you know, back to timing and when there's actually funding available for some of this stuff. So I think we need to have some discussions about what the appropriate steps are moving forward with this information, because I think we do have some groups already involved, some things have already kind of moved forward, like broadband, and really what the best path is for moving some of this forward. And that's my 2 cents for today.
Mr. Chair, could I jump in with one other thought I forgot in my earlier comments, but the 2014 economic study was mentioned, and I recall that originally there was a coast-wide economic study in 2004. We attempted to get other counties on board to do a 10-year update, and when they weren't interested, I know you were on board, Commissioner Hunt, when we decided to invest in doing our own update in 2014. But of course, now that data is getting, outdated. And I would really like to encourage us to at least look at the potential costs and benefits of commissioning a full update of that report, because it's certainly been my impression that data has been very useful to us in pursuing a lot of funding sources, but it is getting significantly out of date now.
I think that point's well taken, and the only thing I'd add is that timing. And I thought, again, maybe this was a good time to bring this report forward with COVID and the wildfires and vaccinations and everything. I guess it's been completed, and now seemed like a time with these federal dollars and state dollars that we've got some groups out there and we can put the pieces together. So I think lots of good information, lots of good discussion, and we'll I think charge the county administrator with trying to provide some focus and move forward. And then again, I think it's been a part of re-envisioning how we do economic development in the county. So last comments, Greg Wolf.
Yeah, just to add that, we've been doing an assessment of the needs of the social safety net in 5 counties around the state. Lincoln County is one of those, with a grant from the Morris Center Foundation. And curiously, as we did the assessment, we found that the same 3 priorities emerged through the safety. The housing being number 1, child care number 2, and broadband number 3. So it's pretty amazing. And just to reiterate, Commissioner Hunt, your point, I think with the CARES Act and with the American Rescue Plan, those 2 both have funding for those 3 things in them. So it is a kind of a good timing relative to those investments.
Okay. Any last comments? All right. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Paul. And lots to do. All right. Last item under reports would be commissioner reports. Commissioner Jacobson, you're on my left, so you go first.
And I just have one brief thing to report. We did get some feedback last week that was so hard to hear us, I guess, when we're live recorded. So I am the model this week for some new technology. I am kind of the guinea pig here. So I have a new lapel mic and a lighted camera I am using. So just would appreciate some feedback, I guess, from people if that seems to make it better or worse, or if it's indifferent. Thanks.
Commissioner Hall.
Nothing more to report right now. Thank you.
All right, the only thing I'll do is provide a little more detail on the conversation I had with the governor last week. Again, the governor gets together occasionally with the chairs from the 36 counties. And I'm guessing there were about 2/3 of the chairs present in the call. It was actually on Wednesday, and the focus of the governor's call then was the rollout of the criteria, the 65% and 70% criteria, and how that would affect the risk levels within the counties. So it was a good conversation, and again, I was able at the time to give kudos to our public health department and partners in the efforts that we've had in getting shots in arms. But I did make the observation that one of the challenges we've had is with the scheduling of people and getting them back for a second shot. So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine seemed to have a lot of attraction, and hopefully the state will be able to continue to get a proportionately greater percentage of Johnson & Johnson vaccines, which will help get a higher level of vaccination, which protects us all. So with that, that would conclude the commissioner reports. Next is public comment. And again, I'll ask Christy, can you show where public comment can be found? There's public comment that comes through the Smart Sheet program. And then there is the consolidated STR public input on the webpage there. Scroll down. There you go. Way at the bottom. So again, there's where the input is received and recorded on a weekly basis relative to the STR program. Again, that's on our website. So that is public comment. Next, we will be recessing into executive session. We'll be having 2 executive sessions. The first one will be pursuant to ORS 192.660 parentheses 2 parentheses B to discuss litigation. And the board may come out of that executive session to take action. And we'll also be in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 parentheses 2 parentheses A to consider employment of a public official. We will hold both those executive sessions in executive session, and then we will come back into public session and may or may not take action on either one of those items. So with that, I am going to call for a 5-minute recess until 5:35, in which case we will reconvene in executive session, and I expect we will come back into public session afterward. With that, we are recessed until 5:35.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
So Christy,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go into my car and I'm gonna have to join there,
okay.
because I have to go take Abby to basketball, but I'll be on the call.